The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome titles at playtmg.com.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Near and Far from Red Raven Games. Then they look back at their review of Pay Dirt in their Dukes Double Take. And finally, they answer mailbag questions. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
Interesting. Well played, sir. And this is episode 149, which we're naming Near, Far, Wherever You Or. O-R-E.
You have to sing that. Sean, you gotta sing that. You
this
gotta
is
sing
not,
it loud and proud.
Alex, this is not the day, this is not the day for me to sing.
Why would that be, Sean?
Because I just had a tooth removed from my head.
Oh.
And it hurts. Well, let's wrap back around. Near, far, wherever you or, you know, the Celine Dion, near, far, wherever you or. How's that?
That's as good as you've ever sung on this podcast, actually.
Thanks.
I think you need to have more teeth pulled.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. No, that name is courtesy Todd. Go ahead, Alex.
Todd Cow.
Thank you. Yeah, so we name all of our episodes with the help of our amazing, awesome, stupendous, fantastic Board Game Geek Guild. We're guild number 2008, and every week we put up a Dukes on Deck where we have all of our listeners contribute, things to talk about later in the episode, including naming the episode. And we're going to give you some runners-up at the end of this episode. So congrats, Todd. That is a fantastic name, and it will be stuck in my head for the rest of the evening. But yeah, Alex, I am trying to put on show voice Sean right now, and it's taking a lot of my energy.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
This is now the Dukes of Alex. You got to pick up the slack here. So yeah, if you've been listening the last couple weeks, I went to Rocky Mountain Gaming Vacation. I had this toothache. They're like, you're going to need a root canal. And then I went up to 12,000 feet at Rocky Mountain, and my tooth was killing me. I didn't sleep all week. And then I came back here. I scheduled the root canal, and then it was supposed to be for next week. And then I'm like, man, this is really bad. It's hurting really bad. I didn't sleep the last 3 nights, and went back to the dentist. I'm like, Doc, you gotta do something for me here. And upon further review, with a second opinion, he's like, yeah, you have a fractured root, so we need to take out the entire tooth and eventually put an implant in. Yeah. So that was yesterday that I went to the dentist. Today they scheduled it. I had the tooth ripped out, and it was an interesting process. I have deep roots, apparently.
Nice. Nice. Deep roots in Albuquerque that are no longer in your mouth.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, at approximately 6:05 p.m. On the Duke's chat, I received this message. By the way, it's going to need to be the, quote, Alex episode, which will make approximately 15% of the audience very, very excited.
Yeah, and we're doing something a little bit different as well. You are not sitting across from me, Alex.
Oh, you've spoiled the radio magic going on here. Yeah,
Oh.
I'm up in Santa Fe. My brother's in town, and so I had dinner with him and my family. And now I'm recording up in Santa Fe instead of down there with you.
Well, Alex, even though you're so far away, near, far, or wherever you are, you're still right. I don't know.
I'll be in your heart with you.
Sure. So who's
Is that how that song goes?
who's Rose and who's Jack in this relationship?
Oh man, I've only seen that movie once. I at least I've seen it, but I've only seen it once, and
So-
it was just the last half of it.
So let me point out that when Titanic was in the theaters, I was a junior and senior in high school.
What year was that?
98, 99?
Okay, yeah, I was 9 years old.
Okay. So like every date I went on, junior and senior year, I saw Titanic. So I saw Titanic like 6 or 7 times in the theater. Like,
Did it make you cry?
the first time, sure, why not? Why not?
Okay,
And-
why not?
But at the time, I also hated Leonardo DiCaprio, like hated him, and now he's like one of my favorite actors. So I was like, yeah, take that, Leo.
I don't know who Jack is in this situation. Maybe I don't actually know. Yeah, I don't know if that fits so well.
You're probably Rose because you'd let me die in the cold, freezing ocean.
Yeah, I probably would, huh?
Yeah.
But you're painting me naked at some point in this too?
Well,
is that in the movie?
Art imitates life. Am I right?
Okay. Well, awesome. Some other quick show business before we get into the Alex episode of the Dukes of Dice. Hey, there's micro badges. We have Dukes of Dice micro badges on BGG, and if you'd like one of them, you can have one for free.
So yeah, while Geek Gold supplies last. So, but it should be fine. I've got plenty of Geek Gold. So yeah.
I do too.
Yay. Do you? Didn't I give it to you?
Well, initially, but then I patronized the BGG website.
Oh, you
this
did.
Past year.
Oh, you finally did.
Yeah, I did.
All right, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. The folks, our friendly folks from Wham, We Are Matt and Matthew posted their latest review, which mirrors our review from last week, Century Spice Road. So if you'd like to hear see their thoughts on Century Spice Road, that is currently up on the Dukes of Dice website.
We mentioned last week that if you're interested in doing some kind of review, some kind of contribution to dukesofdice.com, give us an email, Sean at Dukes of Dice. We might put up a guild in the BGG thread. In the BGG guild put up a thread. There we go, in the BGG guild as well. And we're kind of looking for, like I mentioned last week, something different because like Wham is different. It's not just a review, right? I mean, there's a ton of awesome board game reviews out there, but Wham is wham, right to the point. It's got a cool format, so definitely like to see some different stuff out there. So drop us a line. Let us know if you have some idea that you think would be perfect for dukesofdice.com.
Very cool. All right, on to plays. Sean, what did you get into this week?
So I got to play an abstract game. It's called LYNGK, or LYNGK, LYNGK, and this is part of the GIPF series, which is basically it's a series of these different abstract games, and they all have these weird names like GIPF and Devon and Czar. And in theory, which I haven't actually ever put this theory to the test, you can kind of combine some of these games together, like they can build on each other. But we didn't do any of that. I've only ever played four. This is now the fourth one I've played in the series, this LYNGK. I've only ever played them individually. So I actually got taught this at Rocky Mountain Gaming Vacation by our buddy Mike Fitzgerald, who also designed Baseball Highlights 2045. First mention.
Oh, man. You thief. You stole it.
Yep.
But I ultimately still win because it got mentioned. So
sure, why not?
Take that, Sean.
Hoisted by my own petard. And anyway, I don't even know what that means. I wonder.
Okay. I'll look that up while you finish talking about that game.
Okay. So Mike Fitzgerald taught me this over at Rocky Mountain Gaming Vacation, and then last night at Dukes of Dice Game Night, Empire had a copy in the library, and I showed Max how to play. And this is a pretty interesting game. It uses, I want to say like a 20-pointed star on the board, and then all of these lines intersecting the different points, and so there are all of these vertices, intersections, and on each one of these, you are putting a disc of 5 different colors. There's red, blue, green, white, black. Is that 5? I think so. Then there's also this like gray wild color. And the object of what you're trying to do is to collect the most stacks of 5 of these discs. And it needs to be one of each color. At the beginning of the game, all the colors are neutral. So you can basically move any disc to any adjacent disc to jump it. But it has to be of at least equal height. So I can move a single disc on top of another single disc. Or I can move a stack of 2 onto another stack of 2, but the rule is I can't ever have the same color in a stack. So I can't move a blue on top of a blue, right? Because you eventually got to be 5 different colors. Now, at any point during or before your turn starts, you can claim a color as your own. And throughout the game, you'll only ever be able to claim 2 of the 5 colors. You don't necessarily want to just claim something right away because there are things that you can do to start covering your opponent's colored pieces. Now, what's cool is once you claim a color, you no longer have the restriction of having to jump on an equal or smaller size stack. So if there's a stack of red, white, green, and black, and I've claimed blue. I can move my blue all the way to the top. I've captured it. It's mine, and I'm now winning 1-0. And so there's also some interesting things. There's the link effect, where you can basically take a red stack and move it to a red piece and then bounce off of it, kind of. That make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because there's this interesting tension of when do I start to declare pieces? Because again, you don't want to do it too early, because then your opponent could just start covering those pieces of yours. Because once they're covered, you can no longer really use them to your advantage. And there's this nice little kind of give and take, because I've managed to create the stack of 3, but now you're able to capture it with a stack of 2 that has one of your claimed colors, because that height restriction's removed once you have a claimed color. And so it was good. It's really solid. I really enjoy this. Of the 4 GIF series I've played, I think this is my favorite. I think it's really good, and I really enjoyed it. I managed to beat Mike in my first play, and then Max beat me on a tie. We both had 3 stacks, but then it's who has the most four tile stacks as the tiebreaker, and then 3 tiles, and so on. I really enjoyed this. Not a big fan of purchasing too many abstract games. I mean, there's a handful I do have here at the house. I think that if I didn't have this available at Empire, I would probably pick it up. Abstracts aren't something that Raquel's crazy about, and since it's a 2-player abstract, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to own it, but I definitely enjoyed it, and I'd be happy to get some more plays of it. And I think you'd like it well enough. I mean, you're not really a big abstract fan, with the exception of the Duke and Onitama, right?
I don't mind abstracts if they're simple enough. If the rules are convoluted and then you're getting detached from, you have a lack of theme, and the mechanics aren't snappy enough, so to speak, I'm not going to get too big into an abstract game. But this one sounds like one I'd like to try.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And so this is from Hutch and Rio Grande Games, and it's called LYNGK.
Very, very good. I got in a game of Escape Room, the game from Spin Master Games. So we seem to be mentioning this once every other week or once every week, but there are a lot of these different escape room games out there. This is one that's actually more widely available. I was looking to try and see what kind of price point this is, and I think Walmart has it actually available. So this is one of the more commonly available ones. In terms of the components, actually one of the cooler ones. It's a bigger box game, and it advertises 4 different escape room experiences in one, each of them taking an hour and no more than an hour, because it's an hour countdown clock. So it's set up more like a standard escape room experience. They have 4 different scenarios. They have Prison Break. They have the Virus Lab one. And they have a couple of others. And I was playing this towards the end of the Dukes of Dice game night over at Empire with our good buddy Nick and Cameron, who actually brought the game in. What this does a little differently, Sean, than some of the other escape room games, is there's this big kind of timer thing that also happens to have decoders on the side. So it'll have certain sets of codes or a certain code wheel that you can use. Each one is used for a specific game. And then on top of that, there's the decoder itself and these different keys that you'll slide in, and it will tell you if you're correct or incorrect for that given scenario. And once you get one correct, then you move on to the next part of the scenario. They're done in 3 parts, parts 1, 2, and 3. So you start with part 1. Once you get the code, the 4-letter or 4-digit code for that, or 4-shape code for that matter, you advance. If you're wrong, though, in guessing, it will subtract a minute from your time. So off of that 60-minute clock, you'll lose a minute. The other thing this does is it gives you these hint cards that you get available at certain times. That starting at, say, 40 minutes, you have this hint card that can work for only part 1. Or at 30 minutes, you have this hint card that can only work for part 2. And what I'll say is, if I'm comparing this to Stargazer's Manor and Exit the Game, which are the other 2 escape room games I've played, the difficulty of this one is somewhere in between the 2 of those. We were moving our way through these puzzles pretty well, but there were definitely points where we got stuck. Some of it was our own fault, very clearly. Stuff we just overlooked. I actually had a really good experience with this one, Sean, and I wasn't sure what to expect going in because it is this more mass marketing one. It's not as hobby targeted. It actually worked out pretty well, and you saw the components. It certainly has a good table presence.
Yeah, it really does. I was kind of taken aback by how much was in there, and because it's disposable, right?
Right, it is. After 4 games, you'll be done with the thing.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, it's got some pretty decent components, more than what you'd expect from other games of that vein.
Yeah, and the puzzles aren't at the level of Exit the Game in terms of difficulty, and it's not exactly the same system. It adds a little bit more of an electronic kind of piece to it, but I actually thought it all worked pretty well, and had a good amount of fun. So I'd actually give a recommendation to this one. That's Escape Room the Game from Spin Master Games. Comes with 4 little things and some pretty cool gaming components as well. Sean, what else did you get to the table?
So I got to try Barenpark, spelled Barenpark, Barenpark, and this is designed by Phil Walker Harding, published by Mayfair Games, and I'm going to tell you right now, Alex, this is a cottage garden killer for me. So when I say that, what I mean is that this is a game where you are collecting different Tetris-style pieces, trying to fill them in on your player board and expand and get certain bonuses. So what you're doing is you're trying to build a zoo or a park or something. I don't know. The theme is what it is.
Is it a park for bears?
Probably. I don't know. I don't speak German, but probably. So you have this starting player board, and I think they're like 5x5 grids. And on the grid are these different icons. And when you take a tile piece and you cover one of those icons, it lets you take a certain type of tile piece. So you have the smaller tile pieces that are maybe just a single square, or maybe like a 1x2, a 1x3, and they're typically worth no points. And so that's one category of icon. And then the next icon up gives you access to some other tile pieces that are a little bit bigger, that are worth a little bit more points. And then finally you have another icon which gives you access to these big wonky pieces that are worth a ton more points. And then finally, actually, I already said finally, but finally, there is the symbol that lets you add another section to your park. Ultimately, the game ends when one player has completely filled in 4 sections of the park. And so you're trying to kind of chain together these actions to cover enough icons to keep supplying yourself with different park tiles. You're trying to fully complete individual sections first, because as you complete a section, you're going to get a bonus point icon or bonus point chip. And so you don't want to necessarily do a little bit of everything on the 4 that you build. You kind of want to complete one and then move on, because you're going to get some more points that way. And then there's also some objectives. There are these like 3 objectives, and I think they rotate from game to game, where it says have a certain, have these 3 rivers connect, and you get this bonus point, or be the first to have these certain types of bears in your park. This was really good. It was really snappy. It was just really solid. So for this kind of, filling in a Tetris style board with multiple players, it totally beats Cottage Garden for me. It's not as good as Patchwork. Patchwork is a masterpiece.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Is it a patchwork killer as well?
No. Patchwork is a masterpiece. Patchwork is just phenomenal. I differentiate these in my mind in the sense that this is for 2 players and Barenpark is, for more than 2 players. Although you could play it with 2, but at that point I'd just play Patchwork still. But yeah, no, Cottage Garden is gone. It's a fine game and it's enjoyable, but I don't think there's room for both Cottage Garden and Barenpark. And I found this to be a little bit snappier. I like the art better. And you don't have to worry about dead cats. So.
Oh, well, that's a good thing.
I know that's your favorite part.
But, obviously.
That's totally. So yeah, I'm really excited for you to try this. I think you're going to like it, although now I've probably oversold it, and you will come to hate it. But
you've messed it up already, Sean.
Yeah, what can you do?
You've been hoisted yet again by your own petard.
And did you find out what that means? Where that derives from?
It I think it's first used in Hamlet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, that's Barenpark from Mayfair Games.
Excellent. I got into play of something that I didn't realize that you had played and reviewed, Sean. It's Manhattan Project Energy Empire, which shows you my level of attentiveness sometimes. Womp womp. Womp womp. So this is in the Manhattan Project universe. It was nominated for a Dice Tower Award, which was the primary reason that I was playing it. This was it used to be your copy that you then gave or sold or somehow transferred away to Nick, our Dutchy buddy. And I was surprised that you got rid of this one, Sean, and maybe I needed to go back to listen to the episode to get more full thoughts. So this is a game where you're effectively building a number of buildings. You're chaining off of things as you execute those different buildings. You're trying to generate plastic, science, steel, money without creating too much pollution on your board. Drilling for oil is another thing you do in this game, while also advancing yourself on the United Nations track or claiming achievements. And it flowed pretty well. I seemed to enjoy it off of this play, and it seemed exactly up your alley in that it's one of these games where you're building an engine and trying to execute it in a clever fashion. But for whatever reason, it didn't quite click for you. So I'm curious as to why. So you can fill me in, even though maybe other viewers, listeners in the past know exactly why you didn't like this one so much.
I'm supposed to tell you now?
Yeah, if you want.
Oh. Yeah, I'll just rehash my whole review.
Yeah, go for it.
So there was something about this that I'm like, yeah, this is fun, this is enjoyable. We reviewed this with John from John Gets Games, and I feel like this is a game I probably should have liked more than I wound up in the end, and it was fine. I enjoyed my plays of it well enough, but there was nothing that really grabbed me. And it just wasn't particularly memorable in my mind. I mean, I obviously went to a lot more detail, but yeah, it was okay. It was fine. I don't know that. It's not that I wouldn't to play it again, but I'm certainly not eager to play it again or looking to play it again. I don't know that I'd necessarily turn down a play, but. Yeah, there was just some little spark that was, get it? Energy? We probably made that joke, that was just kind of missing. And I think it's a very competent game otherwise, but just didn't scratch that itch for me.
And it's interesting because we were commenting several times during the play, man, this seems right up Sean's alley. Man, this seems so... Yeah, and Nick himself was surprised that you would be willing to trade it up. I enjoyed it a good amount, but it struck me as more your type of game than not. I was playing as Canada, by the way, so we of course succeeded very well on the diplomacy track, United Nations, maxed that out, and but Nick ended up taking that one with a very 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 good bit of strategy. Just he was chaining cards left and right, and it was not happening. So anyway, that's Manhattan Project Energy Empire. Final one we'll both talk about is Yamatai, which we both got to the table in preparation for episode 150. Oh my goodness, Sean, 150. We're reviewing Yamatai. So
we are indeed.
So I don't want to spoil this one too much. It's a Bruno Cathala game, and similar to Five Tribes, at least on my initial play of this one, Sean.
Yes.
I'm not totally sure what to think about it, and it felt not quite sure what to think about it in a Five Tribes-y way, for me. Yeah,
so I got my second play in of it last night. I've played it 3 players and 2 players. I want to get another play at 4 and maybe a couple more plays before the review, which shouldn't be a problem. So definitely in a lot of ways is the spiritual successor to Five Tribes. There are certainly some design elements that are similar, but it is a very different game in a lot of ways. But there is this sort of interdependence of what I'm doing affects what you're doing, similar into Five Tribes. As I'm making a path of the meeples, I could be setting someone else up to do something on their turn. Kind of similar thing happens here with laying out these boats. So basically what you're doing is you are every turn taking a fleet tile, which gives you a certain number of these different colored boats and gives you some sort of ability, either manipulating boats on the board or taking some off or various number of things. And then ultimately you are trying to kind of explore this chain of islands to collect these culture tokens, which you could then use to buy gin. Oh, excuse me, not gin. They're called specialists in this game. And then once you've cleared the culture tokens from these islands, if you have the right combination of colored ships around an island, you can then build certain types of buildings to score points. That's kind of the short of it. And yeah, yes, Yamatai is a game from Days of Wonder. Last year's Days of Wonder game, Quadropolis, I was not a fan of. This game looks beautiful. Here's what's holding me back right now. What's holding me back is when I first played Five Tribes and we first reviewed it, I was torn. I was like, there are things I really love about this game. There are things that are kind of weird about this game. I really don't know how I feel about it. And I came up with a rating and I was like, I don't know. Once we did the double take, I was like, no, I love Five Tribes. It is a 6 for me. Five Tribes to me now is absolutely amazing. It is a true contender for a top 10 game of all time for me. I think it's just great. My preferred player count is 2, but I'll happily play it at 3 or 4 as long as everyone's kind of snappy. So that all being said, there may be some fair or unfair comparisons of Yamatai to Five Tribes. There could be an aspect of where I have too high of expectations for Yamatai. And it could also be where I'm kind of in that similar thing, like, I don't quite know how I feel about it. I will say that so far, I've been pretty unenthused by my initial plays. Trying not to spoil too much, but a lot could happen in the next couple plays before I review next week. So that's just kind of my initial thoughts.
On my initial play at 3-player, I enjoyed a lot of what the game did, and I think the game has a big Achilles heel, which I don't even want to get into until next week's episode. So tune in then. Hooray!
Hooray!
Hooray! So that's Yamatai, and that's what we played this week. Let's head on over to the news. All right, first up in news, we have a Kinderspiel winner, Sean, and it's the one that we both played and love. Ice Cool. Money.
Money?
Money, yeah. Money, it's awesome.
Oh, like from Swingers? Is this the mid-90s?
Swingers? I've never seen Swingers.
Are we listening to ska music and wearing bowling shirts? Is this happening right now?
I've never seen Swingers. Maybe I should see Swingers, and then I'll get back to you as to whether that reference.
You should see Swingers.
I think it's on Netflix, so I should be able to do that pretty easily.
All right. I'm real quick.
Yeah.
I got an idea. I have an idea. And I mentioned this to Matthew and Matt. They weren't crazy about it, but I'm just gonna throw this out there. Let's throw it out to you. Let's throw it out to the Duchy. What if we did once a month, maybe once every other month, right? We did a bonus episode where we have you watch an old movie. And when I say old, I mean like 10, 15, 20 years ago, that you by all rights should have seen. But that movie also has a board game version of it. And so we could talk about the movie, and we could also talk about the game and how. What do you think?
Here's my thought. All right, you ready for this? I think we used to have the post credits going pretty strong, right? After the credits, there was always something that we'd have going on with that. I think once a month we should have a post credits segment where I'm just talking about a movie that I should have seen. Because here's the thing: if you limit it, there's no Swingers the board game, right?
Sure.
And there's a number of these that I haven't seen that do have board games, but the vast majority do not. So maybe post credits, I don't know, or maybe just a regular show segment, kind of somewhere down towards the bottom. But once a month, Alex watches a movie he should have already seen.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll throw it to the guild, see what the guild thinks.
All right. Anyway, we'll do that. So anyway, what was the point here? Ice Cool.
Yeah, Ice Cool. It won. It's a Kinderspiel winner. Hooray!
Yeah, very, very excited. Again, I hadn't played the other nominees, but Ice Cool is, I think one of my favorite games of the year. I mean, it's really good.
It's amazing.
Let's not do that. That's
okay.
Fine.
No. All right. The rest of the Spiel and the Kennerspiel, we still have a bit of a wait for. That's not going to be announced until July 17th of this year. So. Yeah, we're gonna be kicking back and waiting. There's a big gap between these two for whatever reason, Sean.
So we've both played El Dorado. We've both played King Domino. There's some distribution issues with Magic Maze, like it's kind of out of stock everywhere. It'd be interesting if before they announce, we were able to kind of look at all three in an episode. I think that's probably doable.
It's doable. We're missing on the Kinderspiel side though, Raiders of the North Sea, if we want to go in that direction too. So we're 2 of the 3 on that one, and we're 2 of the 3 on the other one. So yeah, it's certainly unusual for us to be able to have played all of them in time. And it would be nice if that happens. We'll see.
I think we did last year, didn't we?
Before it was announced?
Yeah, we did.
Imhotep before it was announced?
Yeah, Imhotep we played at Dice Tower Con last year, which was before. We did last year.
All right, well, never mind. Not so special. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Kinderspiel winner is Ice Cool, Kinderspiel, and Spiel still to come. And that's most of the news. But this week, we have a special interview segment. It's not a Kickstarter. It's from Suzanne with Board Game Stats, the app, and they've got some news on that front, so take a quick listen into my interview with her. I'm joined by a special guest this week. We have Susan, as I'm allowed to say it, but actually Suzanne, as it's properly pronounced, I think, with the Board Game Stats app. Susan, however I'm going to pronounce it, how are you?
I'm great. We just had a game night, so everything is great.
What did you get to the table?
We played Tichu, or Tichu, I guess you say.
Oh yeah, Tichu. Wonderful game.
And First Class, and Race for the Galaxy.
And I saw recently on the Board Game Stats Twitter that Matainai's gotten some plays of late.
Yes, we recently started playing it, and got quite addicted. Thanks to you.
Excellent. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So run me through this app for folks who don't know. And there's some news and new things coming to it. But what's the background of the Board Game Stats app?
Background. Well, we started the app because we were writing down stuff on papers and putting it in Excel and forgetting stuff, and we just wanted to record our games, but it never worked because it's so annoying. Because then you have a paper here and a paper there, and it never worked. And then we thought, we're going to record it in one place. We'll make an app just for ourselves. And then we made the app. We thought, well, we can put it in the App Store, see what happens. And people started buying it and giving comments and helping new features and everything. So that's really fun, I guess.
How long ago was that?
It was about 3 years ago, somewhere in the summer, 3 years ago.
Why do you think it got the kind of traction it got?
I think mainly because most people were like us. They wanted to record, but they were not at their computers and on the mobile phone recording plays for a board game on Board Game Geek. It's kind of a hassle. So maybe they were writing it down or logging it in an Excel sheet. And well, we try to make the app as easy as possible. Boom, 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 record, and then on to the next game.
Why do you think it is that people like to record? For instance, why do you like to record your plays?
I have always recorded my plays. I have no idea why, but it's so satisfying to see, our age index, so how many games you played as much time. So if you played 3 games 3 times, you have an age index of 3. But now, over the years, we accumulated to about 28. And it's like, okay, we have to play this game 1 or 2 more times, and then we are at 29. And we're kind of addicted to that sort of stuff.
What kind of insights do you think players can get from logging their plays? Are there things that you've learned about your own habits or your own kinds of plays that you've gotten from using this app or from tracking plays overall?
We can see for games. So I mostly play with Earco, who wins the game more. So when we look at our stats for Race for the Galaxy, I always like that example. I always win more than him, so that's good.
Bragging rights.
Yes, that's very important. Or maybe if you complain, I never win this game, then you can show that's not true. You do win a lot.
I think that would be useful for Sean, where Raquel always says that she never wins a game. And I think, I don't know to what degree he actually does track his plays all that closely, but I think he'd probably have a pretty good case to be made if he did track them, possibly using the Board Game Stats app. So what's the big news this week with Board Game Stats?
Well, after months of developing, we're finally going to release the Android version of Board Game Stats.
Okay, that's good news for me. I'm an Android user. I know a lot of folks out there are. Had the demand been there for quite a while to have that version out?
Yeah, about a year into after we released the iOS version. I think people are asking, well, can we get an Android version? But it's a lot of work if you want to do it right. And, well, we were both working full time, so there was really no time to make this. But Irko has now devoted a little bit more time in it, so we could make this Android version.
Very nice. And so Android version is out. Any new features or things that are either in the pipeline or have just come out for the app?
For the iOS app?
Yes.
Well, there are a few things we want. One thing we really want to do first also is for the Android version. It's now the basic app, and we want to make the Deep Stats expansion and the Challenges expansion also.
What are those expansions for folks who don't know?
The Deep Stats expansion adds really a lot of more stats and opportunities to filter your games. So just only show me games that I played with Irko and one of our friends.
I see.
Or only plays on this location between those dates, stuff like that.
Okay. And then the challenges would be?
You can make a challenge, for instance, a 10x10 or 365 times 1 or whatever you want.
So 10x10, for instance, would be playing 10 games 10 times each, right?
Yes, and you can set the time period. Most people will use a year, but you can do whatever you want. And then it will track every time you log a play, which counts for the challenge. It will count it. You can see the progress. And if you complete one of the games, it will tell you, yay, you don't have to play this game anymore because you've completed it.
Okay. And so the idea is to get that Android app more on par with what's already available for iOS.
Yes, and for iOS and Android, of course, because now we're developing for both at the same time. Yeah, a lot of demand is for collection management.
Oh, okay.
So that's syncing to Board Game Geek, like your own games and wishlist, and then stats generated from that, of course. So we're thinking about doing that in the future, and maybe logging expansions. It's a big on the wish list for me also.
Well, anything else you want folks to know about the app, either that's coming or that's already out there, or a pitch you want to make to our listeners?
One feature people always don't know it's in the app, and every time we tell people, they're really glad to know. You can link one game to more entries in the app, and that sounds stupid, but people want to do this for if you have a game that has multiple modes, so you can play it solo or cooperative or any other mode. You can put it in the app 3 times, link it to the same game on Board Game Geek. If you sync to Board Game Geek, it all will be logged under that play, but in the app it's different, so your stats are separated. So Your solo stats are separated from your cooperative stats.
Very cool. Well, that's the Board Game Stats app. You can check that out now, not only just on iOS, but also out on Android. Susan, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again, Alex, for doing that interview with Suzanne. Very interested to hear because I have an Android phone, but I also have an iPad, and I kind of resisted using the iPad version or the iOS version just because I didn't know if I'd always have my iPad with me. Although now with the new one, I kind of do. But anyway, excited that there is now an Android version available.
Yeah, and it looks pretty robust. I'm not a play tracker, but I think for folks who are, there's a lot of cool features on this app in general. So anyway, give that one a look. That's our look at the news.
Convention season is well underway, and Tasty Minstrel Games will be at Origins in June and Gen Con in August. And some really exciting news. If you're going to be attending Origins, they will be doing a soft release of Jiraku, Lemuria, Okidoki, and Samara. In addition, it's also the official wide release of the second expansion for Orleans, called Trade, and intrigue. And hey, did you know that Tasty Minstrel Games has a podcast? Well, they do, and it's hosted by Lance Mixter, the Undead Viking. Go check out the Tasty Minstrel Games podcast. They'll provide insider info, give you information about some of their new releases. They'll have special guests, usually including people from TMG, but there might be some other outside guests as well. They'll give you information for various contests, talk about game design, all sorts of stuff. Definitely worth checking out the new TMG podcast. So please be sure to check out information on all their newest releases over at playtmg.com.
Do you feel the need for adventure? To get out there and explore and really see the world? Really be out there? Well, a lot of times, a lot of people won't be doing that, but you can get a little taste of that with Red Raven Games' latest, it's Near and Far.
So Near and Far is the latest creation from game designer, artist extraordinaire, and publisher Ryan Lockett and Red Raven Games. And this builds on the world that we've seen in Above and Below, but instead of building above and below, you're now going out and exploring the world. There's a couple different modes to play this game in. You can kind of play it in a one-off arcade mode. You can play it in a campaign mode. You can also play it in a character development mode, which will all have kind of slight effects on how the game's played. However, ultimately, the core game is the same from one game to the next. So this takes the storytelling that we saw in Above and Below, and I would say adds a little bit more in terms of game mechanics, so a little bit more in terms of complexity, and maybe a little bit more depth too. So you are an adventurer who can spend some time in town, kind of equipping to do various things. You can go mining to get some money or gems. You can go to the saloon to hire some more people for your party. You can go get some food. You can go get a pack bird, which will help you on your travels. You can go to the Mystic's Hut to get some treasures and some other spaces there as well. But ultimately, these are all kind of helping you equip to go travel. Each game, you're going to have a different map. And this map comes in this spiral-bound book. And there are, I believe, 11 or 12 different maps. And they're all a little bit different. So they have different terrain types. They have a different layout because these are all different locations in this world. And on these maps, you have the main city that you're centered in, and then there is a network of paths from that city to other locations around the map. And some of them will just be these empty spots that eventually you'll build a camp at. Others will be these trade routes that will give you some bonus journey points at the end of the game. That's the victory points if you're to complete these different trade routes. There are some bandits that you have to fight along the way. There are some treasures to be found. But the big thing is eventually you will encounter these different book tokens, which means it's time for a quest. And so there is a corresponding number underneath these different book tokens, and you open up the book and someone reads a scenario to you, and it says, okay, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to fight the person on the road, or do you want to, I don't know, help them bandage their wounded son's broken arm or something? I don't know. I'm just making stuff. I'm making stuff up here. And so it'll say, okay, well, if you want to help, then it's going to be a skill 6 check. But if you want to fight, it's going to be a combat 8 check. And so based on your party that you've assembled, you're going to have either some skill icons or some combat icons. You're rolling a die, trying to meet a threshold. There are some things that you can do in order to affect that roll. And then depending on how well you succeed, or maybe you don't succeed, but if you succeed, you're going to get some sort of benefit. It could be money. It could be reputation with one of the different factions. There's the Outlaws and the Mystics and the Lizard Folk. And it tells this nice little story. And then once you've completed that, or once you've gone to some other spot, you can spend some hearts, which is another resource that your party kind of generates, to establish a camp there. And establishing these camps, everyone starts off with 14. Once you put all of them out, it's going to be giving you points. but then that's also going to trigger the end game. So you definitely want to get these different camps out. It also makes it a little bit easier to travel. So if I'm moving a certain number of spaces over empty ground, I'm having to pay those hearts I talked about in order to go that distance. But if there are camps, whether they're mine or they're your camps, it makes it a little bit easier. You're able to kind of rest and resupply and things like that. So ultimately, that's what you're doing. You are going on these adventures, you're going on these quests, you're trying to equip in town, and then whoever has the most points by doing those various things, by building some artifact cards from your hand, is going to win that particular game. However, if it's a campaign game, we're just adding up these points, and it's going to have some effect when you get to that last scenario. So that's kind of the quick of it to play near and far. Alex, what are your initial thoughts?
So we've tracked Ryan Lockett very closely on this show, mainly because they've been good to us as a publisher. We've had a good relationship with them, but also because we've really been engaged with the games. And of late, there's sort of been this above and below verse, right? There's above and below, sort of the first main game in this, and then Islebound is sort of kind of set in this universe, and near and far is the next step. And to me, it takes the best of what's in above and below and the best in some ways of Islebound, and I'll explain that maybe a little further later, and turns it into this really polished gem. It feels like we've really been building to this, and the wait's been worth it, Sean. I think they hit this one absolutely out of the park.
Yeah, no, I think so too. So before, my favorite Ryan Lockett game was Islebound. I really enjoyed the spatial action selection. It's a pick up and deliver game that I really enjoyed. And I think Ancient World was a close second, but I always felt like there was something just a little bit missing from the Ancient World. A little something more that I wanted. And for the most part, there's a certain sameness to some of his games. And even though this one obviously has some very, very clear connections to above and below, it felt a little bit more different than I'm used to the various Lockett games feeling from one another. Do you think that's true in your case?
Well, yes and no. I at least for me, for instance, above and below is about collecting the appropriate resources to have efficient questing, to have a good number of points, to build outposts as you go. But a lot of it's geared around having good questing. There was other ways of winning that game, but it came down to that. This feels similar in some ways, and in more ways than others. I actually don't. I don't know. You see this one as being a pretty big outlier, though. That's interesting to me.
No. I'm just saying it feels more different than some of the other games. Like, for example, and maybe it's just a simple aesthetic thing. In almost all of his games, you're building these different buildings. You're not building buildings here. You're building artifacts, and so maybe that's really just the same thing, but for whatever reason, thematically, it feels different because you're not kind of establishing a town or an empire. You are this traveler, and on your travels, you are acquiring these different artifacts that are worth journey points at the end of the game, but also can give you some sort of benefits. Like maybe I build something that says, whenever I defeat a threat, I defeat one of the bandits out when I'm journeying, I get a buck or something like that. So I don't know. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, except you are building though. Remember, because you have the trade routes you're building. You're also building camps on gold pieces and rubies.
Right. Yeah, you're building these camps out on the board, but you're not building. I mean, Islebound has it, Ancient World has it, City of Iron has it, where it's the building cards is what I'm referring to.
Sure. Okay.
So yeah, this does. So generally speaking, this takes above and below, and it takes the awesome storytelling, and for my money, it puts a much better, much sounder mechanical surface on it in terms of game mechanics.
Yeah.
I feel more invested in what I'm actually doing in the game, whereas in above and below, it's like, I don't really care what I'm doing. Let's just read the book. You know what I mean? And here I care about both things, I think.
I agree with you. In above and below, I found myself not doing the best thing for me in the game necessarily, so I could go on more quests, so I could adventure more, so I could experience more of that awesome book that really we talked about this not too long ago, where that book was so much the core of the game, you would do stuff that wasn't beneficial to you just to hear another story out of it. In this one, that's not questing is still a big part of it, and you're well incentivized to go questing and quest a bunch in this game. And yet, you would typically be taking actions that benefit you game-wise. Now, I will say, Sean, in terms of my play style of this, I found that I would take quests even in situations where maybe it wasn't always the best move to do so. So I still found myself pushing the envelope and doing that, but I would agree with you in that I care more about the game here, I guess, than I would in something like Above and Below.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have a chance to take a look at the rulebook?
I think I glanced through it at times. In the context of having to look up certain skills or what certain things do. I don't have a fully formed opinion on it. It seemed pretty good from my estimation, but I don't know what your take on it is.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the gameplay itself, the rules section that dealt with here's how every game of this plays, I thought was very good. Some of Ryan's, and we've talked about this before, some of the earlier rule books were kind of rough. I think they've gotten progressively better. He's gotten a lot better. Like the Islebound rule book was great. I think this one is also solid. The only, it was kind of hard to reference things for the various modes of play. So some campaign rules were kind of in different spots. But overall, I think it's a solid effort. I think that he's definitely done a good job growing in terms of rulebook writing. So yeah, I think it's a solid effort.
Components, art, and we always talk about this with Red Raven Games. Ryan is not only a talented designer, but a talented artist as well. There's a reason. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
No, I'm a sucker for his art. I love this art style. It is so different than 95% of what you see out there. And there's just something so magical and whimsical about it. The toad people or the lizard people and like hog people and all. I mean, all of it is just, it's just so different. He's created this really unique fantasy world. It doesn't feel like some generic fantasy world with wizards and barbarians and whatever. It's just so, it's Red Raven Games. You know what I mean? And it's just instantly identifiable. And it's just fantastic. I mean, for me, it's such a huge draw to all of his games.
Yeah, and you get these just charming characters, either the giant robot who's one of the characters that you can play as, who probably has a name in the story mode, I don't know what it is. You get a number of these cool-looking animal characters, whether it be frogkin or these giant chickens or pigs, or there's this, but they feel realistic in a sense, and it just it's this world that feels alive, and the world comes to life through this. What I love about this game, Sean, and it's a component choice I wasn't sure I was going to love, is this spiral-bound map. It's an atlas game in some senses, in that each map you're playing are 2 pages of this spiral-bound book. I would think the spiral piece of this would have gotten in the way, would have been annoying, would not have worked. And for me, it actually ends up working really well. And beyond that, it makes it feel like this is an actual atlas of this actual world.
Right.
And it really brings you into the story in a way that a different component choice might not have.
Yeah, I think that's true, because otherwise, I mean, really, we're talking about a bunch of different boards, right? Because that's essentially what these are. Instead of a traditional board, you have this spiral-bound book that opens up into these maps, and yeah, it feels almost like an artifact from this world. And in fact, there's nothing on the outside cover of it. It's just this like kind of red. It looks like a book. You know what I mean? Like an old tome of some kind. And I think it looks cool. And I think that each map, aside from just placing things in different spots, has its own feel to it. It feels like its own unique piece of geography, and that corresponds to the different storybook elements, right? So each map has its own section within the storybook, and so it ties together. So like there's early on, there's an entire map that has to deal with the fact that these magnetic meteors or asteroids or whatever have fallen to the ground, and it has an effect on the storytelling, and it's really cool.
Well, and the other thing too is there's an interesting design decision in terms of, and we're way off of components art at this point, but I think it's important to bring up here. There's a design decision made here to trade off some amount of replayability for a bunch of different maps and stories tied within that world to different specific locations, which in theory can take away replayability, right? Once you've heard one story from one location, if someone goes and gets the story associated with that location in the future, it's the same story. It doesn't change. It's not like Above and Below where the stories were kind of ever changing and you never know what's going to happen because it's one general game. But because this is a living world and a living map, you have specific encounters that are going to happen at that location. And what I love about that decision, even though it sacrifices some in replayability, is that it brings you into this world again. It allows you to tell a story over the course of a campaign. It allows you to learn about the location you're in and see that location in the context of this greater world. You know, even in between maps, there'll be little arrows saying to this location, to this other spot on the map. And so they all feel connected, even though they're different pages of this same book. And I love that. I absolutely love that.
So let's kind of, before we move on, let's kind of circle back to the rest of the components.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, any issues with the components?
I'm trying to think. I don't recall any that I ran into.
So we have the Kickstarter version because I kickstarted this. So generally, it's just your typical cardboard token chits. I think they're solid quality. You have the thin or the thick cardstock for the individual player boards, which I understand, costs associated with that. It didn't make a big difference to me. You have these nice wooden tent pieces for your various camps. With the Kickstarter, you're getting some metal coins. You're also getting some plastic gems in place of the paper gems, or I guess cardboard gems. And then also you have a bunch of different food pieces, and they're in different denominations. So like 1 is bread, 3 is fish, and then 5 is bacon. Bacon. So I think that overall you are getting a fantastic production in this box.
There's one other thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, unless you're Matthew, there's not enough pencils, but that's fine. I'm fine with just the one pencil.
There's one other thing in here that I thought was really cool is that the adventurers you acquire over the course of this game are two-sided. One side is for use in near and far, and the other side you can use them in Above and Below, which is something they did in Islebound as well. I think that's cool that they're connecting these worlds. And
Absolutely.
they're also sort of serving as not really significant expansions, but some kind of expansion for previously released content. I love that they did that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. So with the gameplay itself, right? I feel like I don't remember much about Above and Below's gameplay, if that makes sense. Like it all just kind of. I remember the storytelling, right? But here, there are so many different things to do in town. There are different ways to kind of equip yourself. You can go get new adventurers. You can go get a pack bird and then try and get a cool treasure. You can go mining. I mean, so mining basically requires a certain amount of skill. And then if you successfully meet that, you're able to put down some more of your tents, which are good ways to just drop those tents, because that's worth points into the game, and also give you some money and gems. But ultimately, I think it all still pushes you to go exploring. I do think that in a 3 and probably a 4-player game especially, there are multiple paths to victory. I think you could spend a little bit more time in town in a higher player count game. In a 2-player count game, I tried that, and you were just out exploring.
I steamrolled you.
Oh,
absolutely
it was brutal.
steamrolled you.
Yeah. And because I had won a previous game kind of doing the same thing, which was very adventuring light. But I did a couple, but for the most part, I was mostly doing stuff in town or just kind of doing things in the countryside without actually going on quests. But I think that you can get away with that in a higher player count game, but in 2 players, I think you absolutely have to be kind of rushing those quests.
And that is the only, not the only negative. One of the small negatives I'd say is I think at 2 players, while the game plays really quickly, and I think you could get through a campaign pretty quickly with this one, whether it be a character-focused campaign or just a broad campaign, I think I don't prefer playing this one at 2 because a lot of those other options are cut off, because you can't play that way, because it allows someone like me to go out there and just blitz and go nuts and go scoop up quests and suck them up like a vacuum and race my way to victory and leave you not a prayer to do anything about it. And I as fun as it was to do that to you, Sean, and I love beating you.
Sure.
In terms of a gameplay experience, I think it plays best at 3 or 4.
Yeah, I think so too. In fact, I think 3 is probably my preferred player count because I've played it all of those counts, and 3 was a good mix of quick snappy turns and also kind of fulfilling interaction. Because the other thing at 2 players that was kind of interesting was the different trade routes, right? So the idea here is that there are several different trade route locations on the board. So there's gears, there's peppers, and basically there are 2 spots usually on kind of opposite ends of the board. If you build a tent on both of those spots, you're going to get like 10 points.
Right.
But if I build on one and then Alex, you build on another, we each get 3 points instead. If they don't get completed, no one gets anything. But in 2 players, it's just kind of weird. It's like, well, if you're going to go build this cog spot A over here, I guess I have to build B, and then no one gets, there's no net effect, right? We both get the same number of points. So it just lost some of the dynamics there, I think, with the trade routes at least. So yeah, I don't know that I particularly enjoyed this at 2 players. I think a higher 3 or 4 is probably preferred.
Well, and let's add that reputation manipulation can often be an important part of the game. A lot of the artifact cards you're trying to build, which will give you certain powers over the course of the game, require different reputation levels, either a good reputation or in some cases a bad reputation. And one of the ways to manipulate that is to go into town and to duel, or to take story actions consistent with whichever direction you're trying to go in. And a lot of times you'll have a pretty good sense of if something's dastardly or not.
Right, and we didn't really touch too much on that in the brief rules overview. But basically, yeah, like you were saying, reputation might be a threshold for some of the artifacts. But also, if you have a high reputation, it's going to give you some endgame journey points as well. And then along with the dueling, yeah, basically these spots in town are semi-exclusive. So if I want to go where Alex already is, I can go there, but I would have to duel him. And the duels aren't necessarily high stakes. There's no downside if you're the defender. You just roll your die, add your combat value. As the attacker, though, I can declare to be either, honorably or honorable or dishonorable.
Correct.
And if I'm dishonorable, I'll get +1 to my roll. But if I win, I'll lose a reputation. If, as the attacker, I lose, I simply go to jail for a turn, and then I can go back to town the next turn, and I can take whatever action I want without dueling, even though it's occupied. And that was, I think it was half a mechanic too many in my mind, the dueling. It wasn't, like I said, it was kind of so low stakes. And sometimes, yeah, you want to go duel to lower your reputation because maybe I have an artifact in hand that requires me to have -3 or less to be able to play it. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't crazy about the dueling, even though, again, as a defender, there's no harm that's going to happen to you. It's just something that happens.
Well, but it also affects usage of spaces. And for instance, in one of my first plays of this, I lost a whole turn because I went and dueled someone who I absolutely should not have dueled.
Sure.
And what I like is it gives you control over that reputation track besides going to the town hall and investing, or besides going out and questing. There are only so many ways you can control your reputation in this game. I like that it included this one that lets you get a bump up or down at no cost to the defender. I actually really like that mechanic, and I think it fits in pretty well.
Interesting. So what did you think about the actual stories themselves?
Just like Above and Below, the highlight of the game for me, still. They're really engaging, really interesting, and you want something to happen. You want someone to succeed at one of those so you can hear how the story resolves. The problem is if you fall short of a roll, a lot of times you're not hearing the resolution of that particular story, which in some cases can be a bummer. There was one setup for a story, Sean, in our 2-player game where I fell short of the role needed to do it. And it was a story, without spoiling anything, it involved chess, that I was really interested to see the result of what I picked. Really, really interested. And unfortunately, I fell short. So you get this reward of not only the stuff you get, but you get the reward of hearing the completion of this interesting tale in this world. We talked about Above and Below. There are these these stories that just kind of stick with you. And I think this game has a tendency to do the same thing. The other benefit with it, though, is because it has a campaign mode, there are pieces of that story that can stick with you, that can continue into new maps, or are ongoing, or through this quest you acquired this thing that sticks with you and has this interesting effect for the course of the game. One of them was, I think, a floating, talking stone head that, according to the flavor text, mumbles gibberish at you as it floats along behind. I love this world, Sean, and I love that this game lets you get even deeper into it.
Yeah, so, for example, you can, from certain quests, acquire a keyword, and that keyword will come up in future quests and might say, if you have this keyword, do this instead. And then there are some kind of not one-time use, but one scenario use things that you get, which can be pretty helpful. Yeah, I agree. I think that the storytelling is definitely a highlight here. And like I said before, it's got the strength of the storytelling and then the strength of what I think are stronger mechanics than Above and Below.
I think it blows Above and Below out of the water mechanically, I should say.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So let's talk a little bit about the other modes of play, especially the campaign mode, because I think, to me, this was one of the bigger draws. Now, keep in mind, for the most part, I'm pretty much auto-backing Ryan Laukatt's games. I just backed Empires of the Void 2 a couple months ago. I kickstarted this. I've kickstarted a bunch of his games. And that being said, still, the fact that this was going to be a campaign-style game where your characters improve over time was a big draw for me. And ultimately, I think this was my biggest disappointment with the game. I am not particularly impressed with the campaign from a mechanical perspective. I think from a narrative perspective, like we talked about, things carrying over from one map to the next narratively, I think is really cool, and I think it's done really well. But as far as your character getting better, basically, as you attempt the different quests, every 3 gets you an experience point, and then you could spend a certain amount of experience points to get these upgraded abilities, and they're all very incremental. And they're good. I mean, they're solid. I'd rather have them than not. But ultimately, I didn't feel like I was really building this awesome questing character who, turned into this amazing character of mine. It was just kind of there, if that makes sense. It wasn't. So in other words, it didn't feel like I was playing an RPG. It didn't feel like I was playing Pathfinder the Adventure card game, where, I mean, that's such a huge part of the game, right? That leveling up, that acquiring new things in your deck. There's very little persistent stuff for your character from one game to the next. And maybe it's a matter of expectations on my part, but I was underwhelmed by that. And that's kind of what I was looking forward to the most.
Interesting. And I only got a small taste of it. And what appealed to me was the story perspective of it.
Sure.
But I didn't see it play out over a longer period, which just didn't really have the chance to. I'm intrigued to really try a full campaign of this after having played just one round through. But your sense of it, Sean, is there's just not enough meat on that bone.
Every game of this, I have had a fantastic time playing. It's been enjoyable. But I just don't get the feel of that campaign. I don't get the feel of leveling up a character. And maybe that's a problem with my expectations. Just because when I hear campaign, that's what I think of. And I think that it's perfectly fine to say, oh, well, when he meant campaign, he meant this kind of narrative collection or this narrative theme from one scenario to the next. And so I think it's just a matter of misplaced expectations on my part.
And I will say, even if it was just that narrative collection going forward, the fact that it's in this world would be appealing enough for me, for my purposes. And there's nothing I've seen with that campaign mode that has me say, oh man, I'm kind of bummed out by this. So, and I think that just speaks to our different taste in games. Now, that being said, I think it's worth talking about replayability here, Sean. I mentioned there was sort of a trade-off in replayability with how they did the maps. I will say overall, though, there's been every effort made here to ensure a good amount of replayability. For one, even in a 4-player game, every book isn't going on every space of the map. So
Correct.
You won't hear all of the stories every time, and you're supposed to kind of distribute them randomly. Separately, I love this design decision of including a deck of cards that sort of serve as dummy stories, fill-in-the-blank stories, stories that they'll set it up with, this is not an actual card as far as I know, an ox is blocking the road, or a Galogo is drowning, and then it'll give you a couple of options for things to do. You can fill in the blank as far as story, but it lets you continue playing even after you've exhausted all of the stories in the book. I love that decision because it helps balance out some of the replayability sacrifice that was made in how this game was designed.
Yeah. And so, like you mentioned before, there are some spaces that have to get covered by books, which are usually the namespaces. But yeah, then there's opportunity for you to kind of randomly distribute them to the other ones, which is kind of a gripe I have. So let me rephrase that. In one sense, I do appreciate the fact that, yes, there are some core story elements that you need to have happen on a particular scenario, and then the rest are kind of just random. But they tell you to randomly place them. That's kind of hard. Am I making sense here?
Kind of.
So the fact that I have to kind of randomly place the remaining books, there's no true random way to do it. And I almost wish it gave you like a matrix of, here are six different versions, and place on these numbers for this one or these numbers. I don't know. It just seemed kind of weird.
You, sir, I think are overthinking it.
I doubt that's true, but go on.
No, I get what you're saying, that the namespaces will dictate some of where you put the other books because you want a good spread of things, you don't want to clump things too close together. I think this is something that players kind of self-balance as they go, though.
Right, but I mean, I suppose you can, I don't know. It just seemed weird to me that you just kind of put them wherever you want. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It might make sense to be like, everyone, gets 2 and they put them out wherever they want. I don't know. It was just kind of weird to me.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see that as a problem.
Well, fine.
Anything else in gameplay innovation? We kind of talked about theme in general, just that the stories here are wonderful, and I really enjoyed them. But I think we've kind of talked about this. This does feel like you're adventuring in this world, Sean, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I feel like there is certainly strong connection between the mechanics of what you're doing and what it means thematically. There's obviously a very strong narrative element here. I don't feel particularly attached to my character. There's not really harm that can befall my character. I mean, there are some negative consequences you can have in a given scenario, but they're usually not. They're not particularly devastating by any stretch of the imagination. So this game does a lot of things right, but it's not quite the campaign style game I'm looking for, if that makes sense.
I get what you're saying. And for me, it's the kind of storytelling game I'm looking for, which I think shows our difference in game tastes. And I like how the mechanics support that, and I like that there's still that great above and below story. This world that Ryan's created is amazing, and I like that you can be in it to the degree that you can in this game.
So what does the Guild have to say about this?
Couple of thoughts from the Guild. BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, we played 3 maps already, and I am loving the game more with each play. It fixes any minor quibbles I had with above and below. The Euro aspects seem fresh. The stories have some interconnectivity that makes them very interesting, and there are certainly multiple paths to victory. The fact that even with 4 people, we don't see all of the stories on every map, plus the numerous different modes of play and the arcade cards to boot, means that the game should be very replayable. It's very early, but so far it's my favorite game of 2017 and at least a 5 on the Ducal rating system. Interesting. Scott Sexton, I'm assuming you want me to just read all of these?
By all means,
Yeah, I
Alex, by
figured.
all means.
Scott Sexton says, I have been very hard on Red Raven Games for a few years now. I think Ryan's business model, where he does everything himself, has rushed some games to press that feel like they lack the polish and development you would get from a normal game publisher. As a result, just about every game he's made has had a second edition or significant revamping. To date, my favorite RRG, Red Raven game, Artifacts Inc., requires a variant rule to really shine. Near and Far has gone a long way to restoring my faith in Red Raven games. I think that the core game is a huge improvement over Above and Below and the normal Tales of Arabian Nights model because of its streamlined design, which is effectively a Euro spin on the traditional Ameritrash adventure-style game. If you took away the storytelling parts of the game, I still think you'd have a charming core game that would go over quite well with younger gamers. The real meat of Near and Far are the amazing story passages. I want to highlight the writing of Alf Siegert especially. Fans of his often overlooked deck building adventure game Fantastica will be able to recognize his distinct writing style. Early 20th century fantasy whimsy, think Alice in Wonderland. Alf's passages stand out for their delightful punchlines and whimsical twists. One passage in particular involving an especially angry rabbit left my son howling in laughter. I'm also very happy with the campaign and character story modes. There's a lot of replayability in this game if you want to unlock all of the story content. All said, Near and Far ranks as probably my favorite RRG product, even nudging out Artifacts Inc. and 8-Minute Empire Legends. So that's what the guild thinks, and pretty strong praise for this one. Sean, will you follow suit?
I have no idea. I'm actually really struggling with this, Alex, because I think I had mentioned earlier that I liked this more than Islebound. And I think I definitely like the mechanics of Islebound more, but the storytelling certainly helps in this game. I was looking back. I had initially given Above and Below a 4, which was a good game worth playing just all the time belongs in the Duchy. By the way, we use a 6-point rating system here. Do you recall, did I drop Above and Below to a 3?
I don't remember. We just did this recently, but I don't remember.
I know. I feel like I did. And I feel like that was in part because of Near and Far kind of killing Above and Below for me. Like, I don't ever foresee myself ever playing Above and Below again.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. If only to get to the story content, I guess, if I'd exhausted Near and Far, but in terms of the gameplay, Near and Far is a better game. And the storytelling's still there that I craved from Above and Below. That was my strange critique of Islebound, if you'll remember, was there's not enough story here. And you're like, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm trying to decide between a 4 and a 5. A 4 is like I said before, a good game, worth playing just all the time, belongs in the Duchy. 5 is a great game, will rarely turn down a play of it. And I don't think it quite gets to a 5. And that's kind of funny because I think coming into this, I was pretty sure I was going to give it a 5. But after the last couple of plays, I was kind of disillusioned by the campaign system. And earlier this week, I played Le Havre. I love Le Havre. Le Havre is such a fantastic game. In terms of mechanics, there's such a higher degree of complexity. There's much more depth to it than say Near and Far. And so I love that, right? With Near and Far, I'm sacrificing some of the complexity and some of the depth that I normally enjoy. I am getting some fantastic narrative and storytelling elements from it. But I feel like right now my disappointment with the campaign system is kind of bringing my score down. Like if this had a much stronger campaign element, I think this would be a very easy 5 for me. But it's just not quite doing enough. I'm not quite. There's not enough that I'm doing with this character over time. I want to keep more stuff from game to game. Does that make sense?
I get what you're saying. You want more of an impact from your decisions in the story than there ends up being.
Yeah, I think so. So it's going to be a 4. A good game, worth playing just all the time, belongs in the Duchy. There is a chance that this could become a 5. Maybe some more plays of it. Maybe if they do some expansion, if there's some way to make the campaign system a little bit more robust. So, like for example, if you get a reward in a quest that says, "Oh, you get this adventurer card until the end of the turn or the end of the scenario," and he gives you this, but then it's gone, right? If there were something that it gave you during the scenario, but then afterwards that person leaves and you flip the card over and get to keep it, and it's some very slight minor advantage. In other words, while that person was in your company, you learned some things from them. Similar to what Ryan did in Ancient World with the different armies. Eventually you retire certain units, and the couple that are still alive are generals that give you slight advantages. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
So I just feel like there needed to be something more persistent from one game to the next to make the campaign system more robust. So right now, it's a 4 because I'm a little disappointed that it wasn't the campaign that I was expecting. And maybe that's not quite fair, but that's how it happens here, Alex.
I think here and there we'll handle the more robust campaign system for you, Sean.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Possibly over and under. That might do it too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Inside outside?
Inside outside, yeah.
What are other opposite prepositions?
I don't know. I'm kind of fresh out at the moment.
Gotcha.
I'm hoping you keep this at a 4 or maybe even drop it so that I can get this off of you. You think that's going to happen?
No, I don't think this has any danger of going down in a score in the future. I mean, I think it could only go up. And yeah.
I meant more so I can get it out of your collection because
I know.
Because this is right up my alley, Sean. I in terms of the level of complexity and the depth, it's right where I want it to be for this kind of a game. It's absolutely where I want it to be. Plus it has the charming story. Plus it has amazing art. Above and below, when I initially rated it, I gave a 5. I gave a 5 mainly on the strength of the story. I love that world so much, and the game was good enough that it didn't turn me off of the story. I wanted to play this more and more for the story. Near and Far not only has that awesome story, not only executes that story in a way that makes you feel part of that world, but also has a better game and a very good game, I think, within this. And when you add all of those factors together, Sean, if you add that up on the ducal scale, what do you think that adds up to?
You're gonna give a 6.
It sure am. It's a 6, and it may be on my top 10 when we do that in about a month from now. It's definitely a contender. That's an all-time favorite. That's a contender for the top 10. I'm not surprised to see you a little bit lower on this, but I think that just kind of shows our difference in game tastes. Yeah, I agree with BJ's assessment that this is so far my favorite game of the year for 2017. I can't think of a game I've enjoyed more in 2017 than this one. Now, keep in mind, I was also gone for 3.5 months.
That is true.
So there's that. Any case, all right, that's our review of Near and Far. Sean gives it a high 4, and I end up giving this one a solid 6.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
This week for our Dukes Double Take, we're looking back at episode 97, Go Dig or Go Home. And we're talking about Pay Dirt this week. Sean, back in the day, a year ago, you gave this one a 4. You said it was solid, but you preferred it at 4 or 5 player counts.
Right.
I said it was a 4, and I liked a lot of what it did thematically, but I had some complaints about fiddliness. Have you played this game since?
I have actually not played it, and I did make the decision to put this up in the Gamers Garage sale that we did back in February, and it went to a good home. So, yeah, this was an interesting game. It's published by the now defunct Crash Games, and you are an Alaskan mining company that's trying to get gold out of them thar hills. Did I say that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, it's more like them thar hills.
Sure. And it was an interesting process. You would basically get these different claims to land, They had different types of dirt on it, and you'd process it through these three different machinery pieces to see what you'd get out at the other end. You would have to hire some new people. There was a lot of interesting things that you did here, but ultimately, it didn't really have too much staying power for me. Although there were a lot of cool things I did like about it. I think it was a solid game, but it's probably going to fall to a 3 for me. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. I'll definitely play this game again, but it just didn't merit a spot in my collection any longer.
And when a game doesn't have any headspace for me, and I haven't played it again, and I haven't thought about playing it again, or suggested, or it's even remotely come up, I think that often tells you that it's a 3. It's okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. I liked a lot of what this game did. I loved the temperature track. I loved the different hardship counters. The auction system was interesting. There's nothing inherently wrong with the game. I think we talked a lot during the review about replayability being a bit of a concern.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it just doesn't. It didn't hold up, and that just happens sometimes. I think we've found with these double takes that games tend to go down a bit more than they go up. And it's tough to tell which ones are going to have staying power and which ones don't. And I think in the case of Pay Dirt, it's an interesting thematic ride, but I can understand why you probably moved it along. And they're just, once you got your plays in of it, okay, it's time to move it along to someone else to get their plays in of it. It's just not one that you're going to come back to time and time and time again. And right. I think that's fine. But I'd say, okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. A higher version of that, I liked a lot of the design pieces to this one. That's just where it's at. That's just kind of how it panned out, I guess, over the course of a year. So that's Pay Dirt. Goes from a 4 to a 3 for Sean, and goes from a 4 to 3 for me. All right, this week for our discussion topic, we're opening up the Duchy Mailbag to answer a few of your questions. And we got a couple on Twitter and a couple on the Guild. Let's dig into them.
All right, so this first one from Twitter, @MessedUpGames, asks, why are Canadians so interesting to game with or visit? Is there something happening here? What's going on here, Alex?
I don't know. In my case, visit, I guess. I think that might be referring to me, possibly. Yeah, I think that's probably referring to me. Hey, by the way, my special Canadian friend is coming soon to a New Mexico near you.
Oh, there's just the one New Mexico.
Yeah, well, that's true. Unless there's some smaller version of Mexico that's also new. Okay. Anyway, she's my friend from Quebec is coming to New Mexico, and she's gonna experience stuff. She'll be flying in the night we record the podcast next week, but late enough where we can record on time. Anyway, that's logistical stuff. I don't know. I guess they're very friendly generally, for the most part, and that's a helpful thing to have in a game partner or buddy.
Okay.
I don't know. Do you have a better answer to this one, Sean?
Well, I think it's kind of like a joke question or a rhetorical question.
Oh, well, fair enough. Thanks, Boba Mess.
Yeah,
Messed Up Games.
But
appreciate it.
But no, Canadians are great. All nationalities are great. I like them all equally.
Excellent.
Except for one. There's one I dislike greatly, and I'll let you guys all figure out who it is.
Wow. Hey, I've pulled that joke before.
Have you?
Thief. Yeah. Remember I was talking about when I was coming back to the show? All of the podcast hosts did great except for one.
Oh.
And I'll let you figure out who that one is.
All right. Well, I'm
sure you stole that from me.
sure you totally completely invented that particular template of joke. So go on.
You'll be hearing from my lawyer, who also happens to be you.
Aha.
Yes. So I hope you're writing yourself a demand letter right now.
A cease and desist.
Yeah. Tell yourself to cease and desist, Sean.
I will. All right, let's move on. So speaking of Canadians, Todd Kauk.
Nice, that was pretty good.
That kind of hurt.
Your voice is really good when you have a tooth pulled.
That kind of hurt. So he asks, what games from the last year has been the biggest surprise, and then the opposite, which has been the most underwhelming? Any ideas there?
I'm just seeing this question.
Well, here. So I don't know if this is quite. Well, I guess it's a. Well, I don't know. Karuba was, and we talked about this in our double take last week. By all accounts, not a game I should have been crazy about, but I absolutely was. Absolutely was. One of the biggest disappointments was probably Warhammer Quest Silver Tower. So Warhammer Quest, the original, a big Grail game for a lot of people. I wouldn't have considered it a Grail game for myself necessarily, but certainly I was eager to see what Games Workshop would do, kind of updating the rules. And I picked up the Silver Tower, which was kind of the first box set in this kind of revamped Warhammer Quest. And I got to tell you, as amazing and as beautiful as the miniatures were, the gameplay was not good. It was not Warhammer Quest for starters. It was some other system. It didn't feel like it had been properly developed. It felt like an old design. Felt like it was designed and developed by people who had very little experience with modern board gaming, with modern dungeon crawls. It was just not a good game. And for the price that you're paying, again, you're paying mostly for the models, but it was just not good. So on the other hand, I will say that I did pick up the Battle for Prospero, which is another Games Workshop board game, and our buddy Jared just finished putting the pieces together for me because I can't stand putting together models. I'll paint them, but I won't put them together. I hate putting them together. And this one I bought knowing that, well, I don't have high expectations for the gameplay, but I totally dig these models. It has to deal with the Horus Heresy and the fall of Prospero, which is the homeworld of the Thousand Suns Space Marine Legion, which were my first army when I started playing 40K. So I really dig the models. It has some Adeptus Custodes, which are really cool. You still there with me, Alex?
Yeah, I am. And yeah. I was zoning out for a bit.
I gave you plenty of time to think.
I was deep in my brain space coming up with an answer to this.
I
did come up with an answer.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Biggest surprise, two of them. Scythe was a huge surprise for me because this was a game I think by any rights is not the kind of game I would typically love.
Okay.
And let alone like, and I loved it and ended up being one of my top games of all time, favorite of the year. That was a surprise for me. The other surprise is a more recent one, is how obsessed I've been with Blood Bowl.
Yeah.
Given the experience I had during that tournament, which was, man, this is taking too long to play. And then subsequently I've been absolutely obsessed and recently bought a Slan team, a Frogmen team for the Blood Bowl League, set to come to Albuquerque quite soon. So I've been surprised at my level of obsession with that. And so that's one. And then what else? Biggest disappointment was probably, and I don't have a biggest disappointment because I never get disappointed in anything, Sean.
Okay. Well,
I actually had one and I totally forgot it. So if I come up with the answer, I'll let you know on Twitter, Todd, and you can spread the word if you so choose. Any case, we had a couple on the guild, a couple from our good buddy BJ from Board Game Gumbo. He's curious about plans for Dice Tower Con. What are you hoping to play or do or see? I'll start off with the second part of that one for myself. I'm hoping to play a bunch of new games.
Oh,
I'm hoping to possibly do an escape room with people, and I'm hoping to see a lot of new games. And folks I know, who I'm friendly with, who are friends of the show, who we see in the context of this con, and maybe not as much otherwise. So, for instance, I'm looking forward to saying hi to Duke Suzanne, who a couple years back was my emissary at my first ever Dice Tower Con, which was my first ever con, period.
She was
your buddy Anthony.
She was your emissary?
Emissary to the board gaming convention world. It makes sense. Think about it.
So she's Captain Sisko, and you're the Prophets from Deep Space Nine?
What?
Moving on.
In terms of plans, there's a baseball highlights tournament Saturday morning that I'm going to. And other than that, we're recording an episode at some point, and that is all I know of. Are there things that I should know of that are planned, John?
Why? You'll just forget them between now and then.
Yeah, but maybe if I re-listen to the episode, no, never mind. Okay.
Yeah. No, so yeah, of course, obviously I'm looking forward to seeing all the cool people that we get to hang out with there, that we get to see just that once a year or a couple times a year at other conventions. I will probably be getting in a game of PAX Premiere with Suzanne and Josh, which is something I'm dying to play. I have PAX Renaissance. It's a Phil Eklund game, and these all kind of use the same system. And apparently Josh is an Eklund fiend, so it'll be good to learn that from someone who knows the games that well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Rory is trying to get me to play an 18xx game there, and I'm like, I don't want to play an 18xx game at Dice Tower Con, although I do want to play an 18xx game soon. But yeah, I don't have any big plans as far as what kinds of games I want to play. Yeah, it's such a good time. Oh, Kemet. I do want to get a game of Kemet because that's become a tradition.
Your annual tradition. Yeah, it's your annual thing.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. My good buddy Ellie, who I grew up with in middle school and high school. Not really middle school, but high school anyway. He used to live in Florida and then just moved back out to Phoenix. But he's still going, so it'll be good to see him. And there's a chance, and I need to talk to him and find out, our other good buddy Andy, Andrew now, from Phoenix, he might be going out, which would be really cool. So I'm very much looking forward to Dice Tower Con. I don't have a lot of plans, a lot of like goals. I just want to play a bunch of awesome games
and meet folks who listen to the show. Hooray! Yeah. What else was I going to... Oh, I have an answer to the previous question.
Excellent.
Biggest disappointment in the last year might have been Food Chain Magnate.
That's your biggest disappointment?
Yeah, I thought I was really going to dig it off of the theme, and I totally didn't like it at all, and mainly because of the theme. That's my answer to that question.
You're just terrible. That's fine.
All right.
Although I could play Food Chain again. Again.
The Canadians infiltrating the podcast.
Actually, Max and I were talking about this last night because last year it was Max, Rory, Suzanne, and I, and we decided to play Food Chain Magnate early morning, and we said, and let's play next to the in the bar area, and we'll just have like Bloody Marys and play Food Chain Magnate, and the bar wasn't open. So this year, I know where the liquor store is, and we'll go get Bloody Mary stuff to play Food Chain Magnate and
Are you going to play Food Chain Magnate again? Really?
I love it.
You can play that back here in Albuquerque, Sean.
I can't play it with Suzanne, so there. Well, actually, I don't know how crazy she is to play it, but I don't know. Point is, some sort of heavy game in the bar area with Bloody Marys in the morning sounds fantastic.
Great. You have fun with that.
You like Bloody Marys?
I do enjoy Bloody Marys. It's actually one of my favorite drinks.
A Bloody Mary will make a heavy game a lot easier for you.
No, it will not, sir. It will just mean I'm having slightly more fun than I would normally have.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, but I think there's better uses of my time. Anyway, BJ also asks, how much research do you do before buying a game? I'll answer this one first as well. Not enough, oftentimes.
Well,
not enough.
Yeah. There's two ways you could answer that. Either not enough for you, Alex, or you don't accept the premise of the question because you don't buy enough games.
No, I buy enough games, and I will say I've bought enough duds where oftentimes not enough research.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is kind of a before the podcast type answer. Yeah, before the podcast, I did a ton of research. I mean, just an absolute ton. Usually trying to find the rule book if possible, looking at different play aids that are available on BGG. Just, I mean, a lot, an absolute lot. And then opening a game was a ritual, and deciding to print up and laminate the player aids and all of that. Now it's almost anticlimactic to get a game. I'm like, a game came in. It must be a day that ends in Y. Just because whether it's review copies or whether it's just stuff I'm getting for us to put in front of us for the podcast. And so I typically buy a bunch more duds than I would have in the past, just because I'm trying to stay up on the hotness and whatnot. This is work, Alex. It's work.
It is hard work and sometimes draining work.
So we got one more question before we wrap this up from Todd Kauk. Still good? Am I still doing that good, Alex?
Yeah, that's solid.
So whose idea was it to let the guild come up with the episode titles? Because that was the best idea you guys ever had.
I don't exactly remember the context of this, other than I think we were bad at it, or we'd be doing it last second. And
So it started back in episode 61. And yeah, for the most part, we would come down to record, used to record Saturday morning. So we'd come down Saturday morning and we'd spend like 25 minutes talking, like trying to come up off the cuff with episode title suggestions. And they were all usually terrible, just terrible. And then eventually, episode 61, I posted something on the guild, and it said, hey, and this is kind of when we started our Dukes on Deck, because that's really what started it. So I said, hey, we're reviewing 5 tribes with the Artisans of Nakala expansion. Anyone have any experience with that? Also, we're going to talk about Essen games. Anyone care about that? Oh, any suggestions for an episode title? And so we started to get some, and eventually Matthew Ward, our buddy, was the first name in episode, The Artisans of Essen.
That's right.
And we just continued that. And it was kind of interesting, too, because somehow the convention where episode title suggestions becoming bold, like that's never something that we said, hey, make sure they're bold. But it did get to a point where other people have mentioned it, hey, nice title suggestion, but it's not bold. You should probably fix that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool how that happened organically, and it's become this great game that I think some folks look forward to week in, week out.
Well, yeah, and I have a bunch of people tell me that they will frequently, once they see that their title was not picked, they'll fast forward to the end of the episode to listen to the top 6 runners up to see if they were at least in the top 6.
Oh, man. Well, hopefully we have some good stuff in between those two parts. Speaking of the honorable mentions, Sean, here are the honorable mentions for this week. Jimmy DM90 with my favorite for this week, Can You Dig It? So that was a good one. I like that one. Dig referring to pay dirt, and then I sort of took the Can You Dig It to refer to the choices you have to make in near and far. Sean wasn't buying it, though. Way to go, Sean.
Can you dig it? Like
Can you dig it?
Can you dig it?
It's an abandoned mine that you've encountered. Can you dig it?
Sure.
Maybe.
Sure. Jesse Metcalf suggested Glory to Rome. Rome spelled R-O-A-M, which makes sense.
That was pretty good too.
Adventuring of near and far.
And the glory of mining gold. And let's add on to that it's also another name of a game, which pretty clever. Nicely done, Jesse. Michael Farnbrook with one of those titles that is never going to win, but made me chuckle anyway. It's set up in the form of a joke. So Sean, how do you protect your gold?
You lock it up, as in Ryan, lock it up. Ha ha! You hear me slapping my knee? That was me slapping my knee.
I hope that's a knee. Anyway, Mike Risley came with The Long and Mining Road. And
instead of long and winding, long and mining. That's
and someone tried to shut down the naming over that, and I was like, yeah, it's a good name.
Yeah,
it's top 6 worthy. It's not shut it down worthy. Come on.
Yeah, Daniel Newman has taken upon himself to prematurely declare the winner. It's premature declaration.
Cut it out.
Wait, anyway. Who, me or him?
Him. Not you.
Okay. So I can say premature declaration all I want?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Finally, Finally, Jeff Epner suggested The Adventures of Joe Dirt. Of course, Pay Dirt's in there, and who doesn't love a David Spade vehicle?
Hey, guess what I haven't seen?
Joe Dirt?
That movie.
That's okay.
I haven't seen it.
That's all right. That's totally fine. Totally fine. Don't worry about it.
That one's acceptable, I guess.
Yeah. You get a pass on that.
Excellent. Well, that's going to do it for this episode, the Alex episode of the Dukes of Dice.
Yeah, I still probably talked 58% of the time.
Yeah, well, that's pretty standard for any episode.
Well, anyway. you just weren't saying enough interesting stuff, Alex. I had to.
Wow. Shot through the heart, and you're to blame. All right, let's wrap this up.
Can I just real quick? I just want to say something.
Oh, okay.
This is from the heart. I just think that it shows fantastic dedication and commitment for me to record tonight after I had a tooth pulled. And
Okay.
I just think I should be commended by you, Alex, by all of our listeners, by everyone out there, and just recognize that sometimes you got to take one for the team.
Your get well bouquet is on its way. It'll be in the form of a Teddy Graham too. You'll get a Teddy
the next time in a game I get accused of not taking one for the team, I'll just reference this.
Sir, that is within the magic circle. What you're referring to is outside of the magic circle.
Whatever. All right, well, let's wrap up episode 149. Thanks again to Todd Kauk for titling this Near, Far, Wherever You Or. Yeah.
Nice.
Very nice. All right, well, until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And so long, Tooth. I hardly knew you.
Hail Hydra.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you so much for listening to The Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on June 22nd, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbo Hydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com, and for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsor, Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome titles at PlayTMG.com. We'll see you back here in 1 week. Until then, game on!